So we're going to continue today with Chapter 6 of Joseph Murphy's book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, Practical Techniques in Mental Healings. Today's technique is basically a continuation almost of the technique we discussed yesterday, the Charles Baudouin technique. This one's called the sleeping technique. But before we get to that, I thought I would just riff for a little bit about something that, has just been on my mind that I think is really, really important. And it's the reason, I know that some of you are probably like, why does it seem like this guy is so critical of this manifesting information that you find on YouTube, for instance, or Reddit or wherever, social media. And I've said before that this channel, a lot of this channel is about making a critical assessment of that commentary. Like it's a rebuttal against the, in my opinion, bullshit that we find on YouTube about the stuff we're about to discuss, like this technique we're about to discuss, about the stuff that Neville talks about the stuff that somebody like Abraham Hicks talks about any law of assumption, law of attraction type of information you're going to hear. One of my big criticisms that I really do not think enough people consider, including myself, is that doing this type of work, doing any type of inner work on yourself, you have to move through and accept how you are feeling. And in my opinion, you have to not only acknowledge, but become fully okay with how you are feeling presently and become more comfortable with your feelings. This means you can't try to coerce your feelings into something. So it's like, feeling is the secret, and because of that I'm going to try to feel a certain way, and if I don't feel a certain way, there's something wrong with me. Hang on to that feeling, hang on to that feeling. If I don't have that feeling, there's something wrong with me. Or I'm thinking a certain thing, and I'm thinking this way, and that means there's something wrong with me. This information that people like Joseph Murphy, people like Neville talk about, lends itself to a lot of unnecessary self-criticism. I don't think Neville or people like Murphy intended that. I think they did their best, usually, to encourage people not to be self-critical. But the way it is being talked about on places like here, almost inevitably is going to lead to a lot of self-judgment, negative self-judgment. And I think of that famous Carl Rogers, who is a very famous psychologist. He's got that famous quote. I'm going to paraphrase it. This isn't the exact quote, but he's basically he said, the paradox is until the point where I'm able to accept myself fully, it's only then, when I accept myself fully, that I'm able to change. And accepting yourself fully as you are right now, your humanness, is just something I think that is really explained terribly in LOA circles. And I've noticed that since I got into these teachings, 8-9 years ago, I've become more self-judgmental of myself. Just being around these teachings and people talking about them, And I've become more self-critical of myself, not only in positive ways, where I've been able to correct my behavior in a positive fashion, in a pragmatic fashion, as we talk about, but also I've become overly self-critical in certain ways about myself and of my feelings and how I feel. Oh, you're not supposed to feel that way because you're not going to manifest what you want. Somebody who I can think of who's a real exception to this. Well, there's two people that come to mind that are modern people who are big in social media who are exceptions to this that are worth mentioning. First of all, Amanda Frances. I know that Carl Rogers quote, that's one of her favorite quotes. You know, she wrote the book Rich as Fuck. She's a great teacher. She talks about self-acceptance often. And if you read Rich as Fuck, stories in that book that she tells about her life, pretty amazing. Much more amazing than the stories you hear people talk about who are trying to apply this Neville advice today, in my opinion. But you see how much self-acceptance helped her and helps her clients, right? And somebody else that I want to give a shout out to, a YouTuber who's really good, because, you know, I like to give shout outs to Neville YouTubers or Neville inspired YouTubers who are actually helpful, is Quasi Joe here. A lot of you probably know him. I'll link above or below, if I can't get the link above, to a great video he did, basically just saying that the law of assumption, which in my opinion, again, is exactly the same thing as the law of attraction, just a different term for saying the same thing. So the law of assumption, a lot of Neville's teachings, is you have to let go and fully accept what you currently are. If you don't do that, there's going to be the inability to change. Once I accept myself fully for what I am, I can then change. So I recommend watching Quasi's video about that because it's really good. He's done a lot of good Neville videos. So those are exceptions to people who are like on social media talking about this stuff. But most of this is like just so self-critical and judgmental of other people. And you're doing this wrong. You shouldn't feel this way. Just fix this. It's not how it works. Your humanness is, you know, something that you have to value and not devalue. Let's read some Joey Murphy, huh? This is, like I said, a short technique that Murphy talks about here. He says the sleeping technique, by entering into a sleepy, drowsy state, effort is reduced to a minimum. By entering into a sleepy, drowsy state, effort is reduced to a minimum. I can't say minimum today. In other words, that's basically SATS, state akin to sleep. The conscious mind is submerged to a great extent when in a sleepy state. The reason for this is that the highest degree of outcropping of the subconscious occurs prior to sleep and just after we awaken. In this state, the negative thoughts, which tend to neutralize your desire and so prevent acceptance by your subconscious mind, are no longer present. You could argue against this. I mean, if you can get yourself into a hypnotic state or a state where you feel vibed out during the day, it's just as effective as doing it before sleep and when you wake up. And I found, for me personally, and, you know, several people I've spoken to, right before you go to sleep or when you wake up, you're not necessarily going to be the most suggestible then. This has become almost like cliche advice. There's obviously something to it, and I do recommend really focusing on how you know, what you're feeling and feeling through what you're feeling before bed and when you wake up. But it's not just about that time. But sleepiness obviously can help you apply these principles. Murphy writes, suppose you want to get rid of a destructive habit. Assume a comfortable posture, relax your body, and be still. Get into a sleepy state, and in that lullaby state, say quietly, over and over again as a lullaby, I am completely free from this habit. Harmony and peace of mind reign supreme. Repeat the above slowly, quietly, and lovingly for 5 or 10 minutes, night and morning. Each time you repeat the words, the emotional value becomes greater. When the urge comes to repeat the negative habit, repeat the above formula out loud by yourself. By this means, you induce the subconscious to accept the idea, and a healing follows. Very straightforward. Now, of course, it's not about that actual phrase. You can use whatever phrase you want, as we've often gone over. You can also just say a word. Murphy elsewhere writes about how you can just say like words like health, 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 wealth, 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 peace, peace, whatever words you want to induce that, right? Induce that. So inducing the state you want by just saying it over and over. And when you're in a sleepy state, a hypnotic state kind of, what's that word? Hypnagogic or whatever they talk about. When you're in that state, just this induction can happen more easily, right? So this lines up with, the previous video we just had from the Baudouin technique about doing this stuff. But again, don't judge yourself so harshly while you're doing it. Let the feelings be there. Again, think about what Carl Rogers said about until I accept myself fully for what I am. It's only when I get to that point that I'm then able to change. Enjoy.